People imagine that scientists are smart. They're not. They're pedestrian, limited thinkers. They don't even like thinking. They believe that their senses are much more important, that what they perceive rather than what they conceive links them to reality. This impacts 100% of scientific theories. They are all formulated in the absence of the rigorous application of reason and logic. Science obliterated an entire type of thinking, that concerned with rationalism, and then claimed to be rational. That's how science rolls. Science is a fanatical, dogmatic ideology based on empiricism, based on the rejection of rationalism, and the entirety of science flows from that, with the inevitability of a religious faith, which science so closely resembles. No scientific theory is ever formulated according to rational and logical principles and concepts. All scientific theories are formulated so as to correspond to sensory observations, not to reason and logic. It's astounding that 100% of scientists are so anti-intellectual that they don't understand that science is a system utterly opposed to reason and logic. Everything good about science in fact comes from mathematics, the quintessential subject of reason and logic. Science, since it opposes rationalism, has no right to use mathematics. If it stopped using mathematics, as it is paradigmatically obligated to do, it would instantly become worthless. Don't ask any scientist why science is entirely dependent on mathematics, a subject which wholly repudiates the scientific method and paradigm. No scientist in the world is equipped to engage in an intellectual debate. Shut up and calculate, they say, because they sure as hell aren't going to publicly defend the coherence of their ideas, theories, method and paradigm. A system, such as science, that refuses to intellectually justify itself is offensive to all intellectuals. It's just another religion, operating according to blind faith. It refuses to be appraised, criticized, evaluated, peer-reviewed by critics rather than cheerleaders. What are scientists afraid of? The blind faith of science is that empiricism is right and everything else, including rationalism, is wrong. Science makes no attempt to defend this position. It does not engage in any debate. No scientists enter into any discussion with philosophers. Science simply assumes the correctness of empiricism. It takes it as an absolute fact that empiricism is right, in no need of any kind of justification. Scientists, those that can be bothered to think about the basis of science at all, and there are very few such scientists, they nearly all belong to the shut up and calculate gang, will typically talk of science relying on falsification principles and verification principles. Unfortunately for scientists, the falsification principle can't be falsified, hence is false in its own terms, and the verification principle can't be verified, hence is false in its own terms. Hardly the basis of a coherent system. Moreover, scientists refuse to attempt to falsify their paradigm of empiricism and materialism, and they regard it as having no need of verification. It's all very well citing falsification and verification principles, no matter how ill-constituted and self-contradicting, but it's a disgrace when the same principles are never directed at the scientific paradigm itself. What's the point of saying that you require a scientific theory to be falsifiable in order to qualify as science, but you have no need for the scientific paradigm in which all scientific theories are framed to also be falsifiable? You dogmatically and ideologically accept it as absolutely true and make no attempt to falsify it. How does that make any sense? It doesn't. But scientists never care about any of this. They are anti-intellectuals. They do not care whether science is coherent. They only care about whether it offers pragmatic success in the observable world. That's why scientific materialism and predatory capitalism are so closely entwined. Just as predatory capitalists are ferocious anti-intellectuals who care nothing for philosophy and coherence and care only about success, so the same is true of scientific materialists. No one ever considers scientists people of high learning and culture. They are always mere functionaries and technicians. They are robot-like people, so robotic that they even robotically deny their own free will. In science class, when was it ever proved that induction is superior to deduction, the synthetic to the analytic, the a posteriori to the a priori, parts to wholes, the physical to the metaphysical, the correspondent to the coherent, the pragmatic to the theoretical, the perceptual to the conceptual, empiricism to rationalism, materialism to idealism, falsification and verification to the principle of sufficient reason and Occam's razor, bottom-up processes to top-down processes, the heuristic to completeness and consistency, sensing to thinking, matters of fact to relations of ideas, truths of fact to truths of reason, heuristics to logic, and science to mathematics. None of this was ever proved, and yet the entire basis of science is that its way of doing things is right, and the other way totally wrong. Science wiped out an entire mode of thinking, rationalism, and never once attempted to engage in any debate about it, or any justification for it. This is so extraordinary given that mathematics is what makes science work, and mathematical thinking is precisely the mode of thinking which science regards as totally false. The idea of mathematics having an ontology is the very last idea science would ever accept, since its acceptance would instantly falsify science and require its replacement by ontological mathematics. Doesn't it alarm you that science deliberately seeks to reject the very thing, mathematics, on which it is 100% reliant? Physicist Eugene Wigner, a Nobel laureate, was one of the extremely rare scientists to ever think about why mathematics is so essential to science, and all he could produce was the strange paper entitled The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics in the Natural Sciences, a paper which managed to avoid more or less every salient point and couldn't even begin to get to grips with the problem. The core problem is in fact why science rejects rationalism, and there is no scientist who has the capacity to give any answer to that. Science rejects the tool, philosophy, which would give it the means to make any intelligible comments about such things. This is a fundamental issue. A subject that is not integrated with philosophy can never be an intellectual subject and can never validate itself. Ontological mathematics, critically, is all about integrating mathematics and rationalist philosophy, and it is rationalist philosophy that is used to validate and justify ontological mathematics and prove that it is the one right answer to existence, while everything else, including science, is false. Scientists imagine a local world of space-time, with non-local weirdness somehow added to it, making it probabilistic rather than deterministic. In fact, reality is a non-local mind, a frequency domain, with a local spacetime world of matter holographically projected inside it, just as a dream is holographically projected inside the mind of a dreamer. The dream world can be as big as the dreamer can imagine, but it never leaves the mind of the dreamer. It cannot break out of the dreamer's mind. Equally, the spacetime world cannot, and never does, break out of the mental singularity that created it. When Nietzsche ventured into trying to explain core reality, he was a disastrously bad philosopher. He wrote, "Let us beware of saying there are laws in nature." What, really? So we should say there are no laws, nothing happens for any reason, and we live in total chaos, with neither rhyme nor reason. How could either mathematics or science exist in a reality with no laws? Nietzsche said, "There are only necessities." You mean like laws? Nietzsche said, "There is no one to command, no one to obey, no one to transgress." Here we have Nietzsche's atheism and hatred of the Cartesian I being trotted out once again. Nietzsche said, "When you realize there are no goals or objectives, then you realize, too, that there is no chance, for only in a world of objectives does the word chance have any meaning." Now we have Nietzsche in the same gang as the scientific materialist crew, claiming that existence is meaningless, purposeless and pointless. Except unlike them, He does not appeal to chance, accident, randomness, a causation, indeterminism, indeterminacy, emergentism, statistics, probabilism, and the multiverse. Instead, he eliminates chance and believes in absolute necessity, i.e., this is eternal recurrence theory, where everything that happens is identically repeated forever in inescapable cycles. Which sounds very like a system of absolute law, of absolute cyclical determinism. Jung wrote, "Very many people are wholly identified with their outer attitude and therefore have no conscious relation to their inner processes. Scientists wholly identify with their sense organs, which are directed at the outer world. The inevitable consequence is that they ignore all inner processes. They disregard the existence of mind. They cannot accept its existence because they cannot observe it with their external sense organs. They repudiate their own subjectivity." Ontological mathematics is about privileging the rationalist mode of thinking over that of empiricism. Scientific materialism is about privileging empiricism and dismissing rationalism as an unreal abstraction. This all comes down to science refusing to accept the ontology of anything that is not material and perceptual. This inability of science to accept reason and logic as real, as ontologically encoded in existence, means that science will never explain reality. Because of science's defining ideology, which is fallacious, science will never succeed in providing an answer to existence. Science's greatest fear is of being shown to be irrational and illogical. While science is up against religion and spirituality, it can never seem irrational and illogical, in comparison. However, everything changes when it comes up against mathematics. That's why scientists are so appalled by ontological mathematics. They instinctively know that they face no greater threat, that in direct competition with ontological mathematics, science would suddenly be exposed as an irrational and illogical religion of the human senses. Nietzsche said, "Do you believe that the sciences would have arisen and grown up if the sorcerers, alchemists, astrologers and witches had not been their forerunners, those who, with their promisings and foreshadowings, had first to create a thirst, a hunger, and a taste for hidden and forbidden powers? Science are just alchemists and astrologers who got lucky by chancing upon mathematics.